Wow, we have a lot of people on the call.
Welcome.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. My name's
Hello.
Bianca. Hi. My name is Bianca. I am a registered dietitian, and I'm going to be your host today on behalf of Swerve. I am going to give people about like 5 minutes to just trickle in because we did get a lot of RSVPs for the event. In the meantime, we do want to hear where you're joining us from. So you can just use the chat box and let us know. Like I'm here tuning in from Stamford, Connecticut, on the East Coast. So you can just drop in the chat where you're tuning in from. Let's see, Fresno, California, Kent State. I think that's in Massachusetts, right? Maybe New York, Kentucky, West Virginia, Park City, Utah, Louisiana, Texas, Ohio. Wow, we're from everywhere tonight. I love it. And Regan, you are in near Augusta, right?
Augusta, Georgia. So somebody logged in from Charleston. She's my upstairs neighbor, I guess you'd say. Charleston is sort of over to the up and east from me.
I love it. Some neighbors here. Great. So a few other things. So we are going to be using the chat box during today's conversation with Regan. So don't be shy. Feel free as we're chatting to put your questions in there. This is supposed to be like a networking event. So please don't be shy. There is going to be a 15-minute Q&A at the end of our session. So if we don't get to your question, because maybe there's just too many or I miss it, my apologies. We will get to it in the end. And another reminder, since there are quite a few people on this Zoom, you may want to switch your Zoom view to speaker view. That'll just show you just whoever's speaking at that moment, their screens, their video cam is going to be like the main thing on your screen. And that is all like my housekeeping stuff. I just want to formally welcome you now that we've had more people sign in to this holiday baking and advice for future RDs hosted by Swerve. Once again, my name is Bianca. And to give you a little bit more background, this Zoom is actually one event in a series of events that Swerve started during the pandemic. So they really saw that, you know, as RDs to be, networking is so valuable, not only in helping you kind of navigate kind of what area of nutrition you want to go into, but also for internship opportunities and then job opportunities for after the internship. So Swerve saw that need. They saw that no one was doing much networking in the middle of a pandemic. So they took it virtual just because they support dietitians and they want to support the RD2B community. So that is why we're here tonight. And also because we love dessert. So before I introduce Regan, I do want to just tell you a little bit more about Swerve. Has anybody here, and you can once again put this in the chat box, has anybody here baked with Swerve before? It's okay if it's a no. Yes. Oh, Michelle saying yes. Awesome. I hope you liked it. Evelyn says not yet. Chelsea says no. Yes. Okay. So we have some yeses and some nos. So I did want to introduce you to Swerve a bit. So this is our Swerve granular. Swerve is a line of 0 calorie, 0 sugar, natural sweeteners. And the main ingredient is erythritol, which is actually found naturally in fruits and some starchy vegetables. One of the things I love about Swerve is that it measures cup for cup like sugar. So that means for any of your holiday baking, it's just a super easy substitution. So it's 1 for 1. So if if your family recipe has 1 cup of sugar, you're going to use 1 cup of Swerve. And the other thing is that Swerve, it's a whole line. So it actually comes in the granular, confectioners, and brown. So truly any like recipe you have, there's a substitution for it. Swerve also has a line of bake mixes. So this is their vanilla cake mix. And all the bake mixes are carb conscious and they're grain-free and gluten-free. So great for the gluten-free crowd. And what I also love about these is that in the way that they're grain-free and gluten-free is because they use coconut and almond flour, which are high quality ingredients, much more nutrient dense than regular white flour. And this just makes it just stands apart from any other bake mix that you're going to find in the grocery store. So that's a bit about Swerve. Regan, I am going to introduce you and share your bio, and then I want to jump in so that we can hear all about your wonderful career and that we can just soak up any tips to help RDs to be here navigate their RD journey.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So Regan Jones is a nationally known award-winning registered dietitian, nutritionist. She has more than 20 plus years of experience sharing quick and easy solutions for healthy living, including roles as a former assistant food editor at Weight Watchers and Cooking Light magazines, and as a national media spokesperson for the Southeast Dairy Association and National Dairy Council. Regan's recipes and nutrition insights are frequently featured in the national media. In 2017, she was awarded the prestigious Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Media Excellence Award. That's a big award. And Jones has been blazing trails as a woman entrepreneur for really more than a decade, founding popular healthy living brands, including the Recipe Redux, Blog Brulee, and Healthy Aperture, all of which I knew about before I even met you, Regan. So I thought that was like so cool.
Awesome. That's great to hear.
In 2020, she launched Fasting and Food, a dietitian-led 4-day metabolic reset. Having fallen in love with fitness after 40, Regan is a certified personal trainer and can regularly be found in the gym or on the road sharing workouts with followers and fans. A busy mom of 2, she also enjoys cooking and, of course, baking for her family near her home, as we said, in Augusta, Georgia. So welcome, Regan.
Yeah, it's good to be with you tonight. I'm so excited that we're able to do this and get together. You mentioned how important networking is. I mean, that's certainly been a part of my journey. And now being able to network, you know, the way we're doing it tonight is so important, not just for people in their established careers, but certainly as RDs to be.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I can't wait for everyone to hear kind of about your story and how you got to where you are and all the opportunities that you've, you know, really like ran after. So all that includes like networking is a big piece of that.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, what I always love to ask dietitians, because everyone kind of gets to this profession in a different way, is what drove you to even start a career in nutrition? Like all of us, we could have chosen finance or we could have went into construction or something. So what really like, what made you gravitate toward nutrition?
You know, when I look at it today, I think it should have been obvious to me growing up that this would be the career that I would go into, but I actually didn't know about dietetics or that being a dietitian was a career when I went to college. I was always good at math and science when I was in high school, and definitely when I was in high school, you know, and still to this day, I think that, you know, there was a concerted effort to really push young women, especially, into careers in math and science. And so, I mean, I knew so many of them engineering, pre-pharmacy, and they were all very, very popular. And I kind of like, you know, sort of matriculated around my university trying those out, and they never really felt right for me. But I grew up with a grandmother who was, long before being into health and wellness was like cool and trendy and the thing that people seem super interested in. She was always interested in health and wellness, and she kind of instilled that in me growing up. So I had this, you know, I'm at college and I'm in these math and science classes, but I also have this passion for health and wellness. And fortunately, in looking at an elective to take very early on, I saw an intro to dietetics, and I was like, well, you know, what is this? I was introduced to that. And then, you know, the whole world was open to me then, that I could make an entire career doing a couple of different things that I loved, which were cooking. I've always been a passionate cook. And then also just being really passionate about health and wellness. And that was how I got my, you know, my first start in the field.
That's so cool. And what you said, like your love for science and then also for health and wellness, like that really is kind of what the profession is all about. It's really like a marriage of those two things. And
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, that's a really good point that like your grandmother was essentially like ahead of her time for being so interested in health and wellness. Like as dietitians now, it's so great that people are paying so much attention, but not as much probably back then.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So in meeting you, one of the things, and just that we went through in your bio, like one of the things that really stood out to me, and I think that a lot of the RDs to be on this call want to hear about is your position as assistant food editor at Cooking Light and Weight Watchers. So how did you even find those opportunities?
Well, that was another, I guess, fortunate, sort of serendipitous happening. I did my internship. I graduated from Auburn University, and I did my graduate work and my dietetic internship at University of Alabama in Birmingham. And at that time, Southern Progress was a part of Time Inc. It was a big hub of publishing, and they published Southern Living Magazine, Coastal Living Magazine, Cooking Light Magazine, Weight Watcher Magazine, Health Magazine came over from San Francisco a few years after I got there. Anyway, when I was in my internship, we just had the opportunity to go and tour because they had at that time maybe 4, 5 dietitians that worked there. And we as dietetic interns just had an opportunity to go tour and see like, hey, this is where dietitians, a unique area that dietitians were working in. Again, I was just like, wow, I can't believe this is in, my own backyard. I'm in, UAB was a very, at that point, it may still be, a very clinical internship. And as much as I loved it, thought it was a wonderful school, loved my class and all my professors, I just knew that clinical work was not the best fit for me. And so it was about halfway through our internship where we went toward the magazine, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And as I approached the end of my internship and we were all looking for work positions and applying for positions, Southern Living Cookbooks had an open position for a test kitchen professional, no RD required. It was just a culinary based position. And I had a nutrition and food science degree. That was what my undergraduate was in. And then, this background in really understanding how to cook, having grown up cooking. So I applied for it, and they were very much like, you're overqualified. Like, you're a dietitian. That's not what we're looking for. And I was like, but I know how to cook. I know how to sweep floors. I want this job, because I knew that getting my foot in the door was what was important to be able to see one of those dietitian jobs and potentially get one of those in the future. And so that was my first job. That was a test kitchen professional. And not probably 3 or 4 months after starting that job as a test kitchen professional, Weight Watchers magazine posted for an assistant food editor, and that they did at that time need a dietitian and want a dietitian. And, I got the job, and really, truly, the rest is history from there, because that was what got my foot in the door in media. And everything that I've done since, while media has changed tremendously in the last decade to include social media, it was really, saying to those interviewers, I'll sweep your floors. I just want this job. It was really the opportunity to get in at a publishing company that kind of opened up the doors for all the media that I've done since then.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I wrote some notes here because I feel like there's so many like lessons to be learned in your story for even just that first role that kind of put you on track to where you are now. So the first thing that came to my mind was that you had mentioned that you just like went on a tour, it sounds like as part of, the curriculum or just like exposure that your program afforded you guys, which is awesome. And something that I kind of wanted to mention on this call is that similar to like all the rotations in our internships, I know plenty of dietitians who went into their internship thinking, I'm going to be clinical. And then they, just keep your eyes open and it'll change. Yeah. Just like how you went on that tour. Like they think I'm going to be on the clinical track and then they end up in counseling, or they think they're going to end up in counseling and then they end up in communications. So I would say to go on every tour and every volunteer opportunity, just go for it because you never know.
I think you're so smart to point that out, because I think sometimes it can feel when we're starting out in our career, like we have to have it all figured out. And there's just such intense pressure. I think, especially nowadays, because people start their careers in social media when they're, in middle school. So there's like this intense pressure to have it all figured out and to have your vision board and to know exactly what you're going to do. And there's so much pressure, on young professionals to have it figured out so early. And the reality is that if I had a preconceived notion about what I was going to do, my eyes might not have been open. I might not have been willing. I think it was a required activity, but there are a lot of things that are not required activities that you just have to, like doing this tonight, this not a required activity. So getting on, there may be something that I say that will like spark some interest for the future. So being, it's good to have a plan, but it's also good to have a heart that's open and receptive to say, hey, there are a lot of opportunities. I don't know what I don't know. So let me see what's out there.
Yeah, that's like really great advice. Have a plan and an open heart. And
yeah,
having those two things equal, just the possibilities are really endless.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Two other things I wanted to point out, and then we'll move on to the next question. But I do wanted to just mention how you said like you were willing to just sweep the floors, like you knew that there, like maybe there wasn't a dietitian position open then, but you saw the opportunity to get in anywhere on the ground floor, pun intended. So I think that is just major, just to keep in mind, because it can be frustrating when you're on looking for that first position and like experience is required, but just like getting, like if you know that this is where you want to start out, it doesn't mean you have to stay there forever, but if you know it's something you want to try, just go for it.
Yeah, I've actually had the interview was with two different women, and I've had them tell me, it was years ago, but I had them tell me, we were not going to give you that job just based on your resume, like when we saw you on paper, but we were going to give you an interview. And when you told us you were willing to sweep the floors, like we both agreed, like that was, we knew then, okay, we want this person. So, I mean, I really, when you are passionate about a job that you want, that's a part of like closing the deal, in sales is like really asking for what you want. Like, I want to be here. I will sweep the floors. I want to be in this job.
Yeah, I love that. So important. So tell us more about Healthy Aperture and how I know that when we've talked before, you've mentioned that you started Healthy Aperture because you really saw an opportunity. So can you just share more about that?
Yeah. So for, RDs to be who don't know what Healthy Aperture is, it's at this point, we have about 6,000 bloggers that are registered with the site. It's a visual browsing medium where food bloggers will submit their images and link back to their websites. And so a user can go on and can look through and browse healthy recipes. And then, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship where we send traffic to them and they're sharing content. Healthy Aperture was sort of my vision before Pinterest ever started. I was a food blogger, adopted food blogging very early, had a lot of fellow healthy living food bloggers. And we were sort of, I would say, frustrated that a lot of the sites at that point, again, this was pre-Pinterest, if you can even imagine that there was a world that was pre-Pinterest. A lot of the sites at that point were really devoted to food that was, I don't want to say unhealthy. That's not, I'm very much a anti, all food, you kind of get to use that term, but like all foods can fit. But they weren't necessarily like elevating the healthy living bloggers. So Healthy Aperture was a way that we could bring healthy living bloggers together and just basically elevate the voice and the vision and the display and the syndication of healthy living bloggers. And that was, gosh, that's been about, I guess, 10 years ago now. And it's just been amazing to see, we still have so many bloggers who that's where they come to like share their content and to browse for other new content, because as sites like Pinterest have changed over the years, it's an amazing browsing platform, but it's full of so much. And sometimes people just really want to sit down and be able to browse through beautiful, healthy photography of healthy recipes.
Yeah, I actually, when I was an intern myself, I worked with two really like leading dietitian bloggers, and that's where I learned about Healthy Aperture, and it like just so valuable. And I know that it's something we've talked about, and with Healthy Aperture, really, you saw a need, right? And you just
Right.
like were like, I need to create this thing because people
Yeah.
need it.
Yeah.
And I know you've also mentioned like being an early adopter and kind of those two things being big tips for future RDs in not only finding opportunities, but creating opportunities. Can you kind of expand upon that, especially kind of the early adopter situation and how they can keep their eyes peeled? Because there's always new apps, there's like always new platforms.
Yeah. You know, 10 years ago, I mean, when people were first getting started really seriously, especially dietitians doing food blogging or being on social media sites, it looked a lot different than it does now. I mean, the space is just much more crowded. There are a lot more, you know, apps and just a lot more voices out there. So I acknowledge that that time frame was a little bit different because there just felt like there were a lot of voids, you know. I just talked about the void for Healthy Aperture when we did Blog Brulee. That was a blogging conference of mostly healthy living bloggers. And that's because at that time there weren't, and, you know, there have been some since then. So, you know, I acknowledge that a lot of what I started at just a unique time when there were voids. But I think that the concept is still the same today, in that if you are looking with a critical eye at where people are and what they're participating in, and you are saying to yourself in earnest, what's missing here? You know, what am I missing as a user? Instead of always thinking like, how can I get in on something that's already skyrocketed? You know, maybe thinking like, well, what's missing? There's still so many opportunities to figure out, you know, where you can contribute. And even if it's on a site or a platform that has already started growing, like, are there dietitians out there? I mean, I think we're going to maybe talk about this, but I was one of the first dietitians that really got on Twitter and started being a dietitian on Twitter. But you can, you know, you don't necessarily have to be the first dietitian. Maybe you're the dietitian that's going to talk about gluten-free baking or grain-free baking, or, you know, so really looking at like what's not being done and uniquely, what do I offer? I think that's the other thing, is that to be sustainable in what you're doing in your career and to really enjoy it and grow it, it has to authentically be you and something that you're passionate about. So you kind of have to look at both of those things. I was passionate about healthy food photography. I always believed that healthy food could be just as appetizing as less healthful food. And so that was, you know, that was sort of the passion with Healthy Aperture, was like elevating that. And so it's really about looking at like, what am I passionate about and where maybe is there a void? And to that end, you know, when we know now, you know, how popular like reels are on Instagram, or we know how popular TikTok is, like you have to look like realistically, like, is one of those apps, you know, more preferable to you than the other? And then just keep your ears open for new apps. Like you say, I mean, gosh, 5 years ago, I don't know exactly when Musical.ly became TikTok, but, you know, it wasn't that many years ago. There was no TikTok. There was Musical.ly, and there were just like, you know, middle school girls that were on it. And so you just kind of have to keep your ear open to like, what is the new technology and what are people using, and see if it's something you can jump into. That being said, and I want to give this last little point on this, I just encourage new professionals and seasoned professionals to never get caught in the trap of thinking that they have to do everything, because it's really hard to be all things to all people on all platforms. You just kind of water yourself down. So, you know, really looking at like, what is the platform I feel like I can make the biggest impact on?
I'm so glad you mentioned that because you and I had spoke about that a few weeks ago. Because there is such pressure, like a lot of people on this call, and feel free to drop it in the chat. Like you may already be giving nutrition advice either to friends and family or specifically like on social media. And there is this pressure to kind of be on all platforms at once. And like you said, Reagan, like in that way, it can be better, especially starting out, to start out strong, just a few platforms, whether it's social media or just a few things. Like it could be anything when it comes to your nutrition career, and just really like honing in on focusing on doing something well first and authentically, as you had mentioned, versus feeling like you have to be everywhere because there's all this pressure. So I think
Yeah.
that's such a good point.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times what you realize is when you're on all the different platforms, if you have a really devoted fan base, they're seeing the same thing on all these platforms, and they don't necessarily need or want to see it 5 different times. So maybe you can really double down on 2 platforms and kind of diversify the content that's on either one of those. And then just let other people do those other platforms. It's okay for other people to like grow on those platforms and you to grow in your space.
Yeah, so important. And I know, speaking of platforms, I know one of one of your platforms is really podcasting. So
Yeah.
what like brought you to start, and it's called This Unmillennial Life.
Right.
What brought you to start the podcast, and like how did you even go about doing that?
Yeah, so I love the podcast story. It is my primary platform now. I love it as a medium. It's funny to think about how many years I spent at a desk writing for magazines and behind a camera doing interviews, as a national spokesperson. But the podcast medium, I love. And I came to it to be a podcaster very naturally because I was a podcast user. Here again, a fairly early adopter of the medium. I mean, podcasts today are ubiquitous. It feels like they're everywhere, but my podcast is now in its 5th season. So, podcasts were just beginning to, I feel like, I don't know if anybody listened to the podcast Serial, but I remember listening to Serial and like really like, oh, this true crime podcast is great. But now I'm like, I'd really like to listen to other things that have to do with not only nutrition, but like other aspects that are, a part of my life. And it was kind of in that moment of thinking like, I am more than health, just health and wellness. I am more than just nutrition. I am more than recipes. Those things I'm super passionate about. And I always want to keep those as a part of my work. But I have other things that, people ask me about or that I have interest in. And I kept thinking, oh, I really want to find a podcast like that. And I wanted to speak to women of my generation. I'm a Gen Xer, and we are like this tiny, tiny generation that nobody knows that we even exist, And at the time, really then, like millennial was, talked about a lot. And so, I don't know if anybody, This American Life was really, it still is very popular podcast. And I just one day had this thought, like, wouldn't it be really cool if there was a podcast like This Unmillennial Life? And I, kind of had that moment. I was like, it doesn't exist. And it was really about fitting a need, filling a void, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, there's so many like huge themes and just huge themes that really it's a red thread throughout like your whole career, truly.
Yeah.
Because you, like what you had mentioned about like, wait, like how about the Gen Xers? Like I'm going to make This Unmillennial Life podcast.
Right.
That's really what you were saying about being authentic and like finding your audience, because you can't be everyone's audience, whether it's on social or even in nutrition and food writing, which I actually wanted to ask you about, because I know that there's a lot of future RDs here that are interested in doing writing, and it's not necessarily something that we learn always in like our internships or even in our coursework. Do you have any tips specifically for future RDs looking to get into food and nutrition writing?
Yeah, I think at the bare minimum, it's really important to learn how to be a good writer. And if that is not something that you have learned in school and you've not made that a part of your major or have the opportunity to have some sort of communications focus, you know, the beauty of the day and times that we're living in are there are so many like master classes online. So, you know, first of all, get the skill level. You know, that kind of goes back to what I was saying about getting that job in the test kitchen. I couldn't have gotten that job, even though I said I would sweep the floors, if I hadn't passed. They had like a culinary test. I had to have the skills. So I'd say at face value, like make sure that you are a good writer, that you know how to write. And then I really would, I think at this point, there are, especially for dietitians, there are a few like key classes, master classes, online courses that really talk about kind of breaking into the new medium, because, you know, I'm from the writing background of writing for print magazines. That was really what I was doing for so long. And now so much is digital. And so it's really, you know, kind of learning how to navigate that world. And it can be, the wonderful thing about that is, you know, when I started out in the magazine world, I mean, there were a handful of healthy living magazines, and, you know, any dietitian that wanted to write for them was like competing for just a handful of spots. Now there are so many wonderful sites out there that are constantly looking, you know, they're just sponges trying to absorb good content. So there are a lot more opportunities out there. And if you're willing, you know, to put in the work and you have good quality content, then I think that there are a lot of options. The other thing that I would say is, just like I kind of talked about, really familiarizing yourself with the platform that you're interested in being on, and, you know, being a genuine, avid, you know, authentic user of it. It's the same thing with sites. If you want to really, really write for, you know, a shape.com or whatever the site is, like, know the site, know what the voice is. And that's a concept of being a good writer, so that then if you pitch yourself to their editors, like, you genuinely are authentically coming across as someone who understands the platform that they're writing for.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that's like so helpful. We actually have quite a few people interested in food writing, so I'm gonna shout out their questions here that came from this chat. Kara said, can you touch on food writing for general audiences and the intersection of evidence-based nutrition research? One thing that comes to mind for general audiences, I don't have the grade level in my head, but isn't there like a recommended grade level that you should be writing at, like a grade level for reading?
Yeah, I don't think you should ever, and I could be wrong about this, but if I remember correctly, you should never write above an 8th grade level. And that really basically has to go back to like literacy levels. And, you know, I think we typically learn some of that in dietetics as well, you know, just in the way that like materials are written for the general audience. So, I mean, I think that's one thing to know. You know, here again, the times that we're living in today, like if you're writing for your own website, there are plugins that you can add to your website. They're going to tell you you're writing, you know, your sentences are too long, or you're using too many of these types of phrases. So from that standpoint, and you know, like I'm not exactly sure with the question, if we're talking about writing like for your own website or writing for someone else. All of my writing today is done for myself. The way I serve the media now is not writing for the media. I serve as like spokesperson or as a resource when a writer needs a dietitian that she wants to interview. That's how I typically function. So all of the writing that I'm doing for my website or to accompany my podcast. And I really rely on kind of what you said, you know, just thinking about reading level, thinking about readability, thinking about how people scan. I mean, writing has changed a lot because, you know, where we used to try to write clever headlines for articles, now you're really trying to write headlines that work for SEO, and you're trying to write for SEO. And here again, writing for SEO is something that you're not going to probably learn in 99.9% of internships. And when you get out, if you're really interested in building a platform and your website and having really rich content, then you have to, you know, learn how to write for SEO. And there are lots of classes online to teach you how to do that.
Yeah, and even classes are so helpful, like that additional continuing education. I also know, just sharing from like experience, I know dietitians that have taken classes, but I also know dietitians who have just read, like either reading books about SEO or just reading articles about SEO, like just slowly picking up the information and kind of like living and learning and just seeing what works. So definitely, I mean, the research and the education piece is important. You don't want to just like put something out there without like having
Sure,
any
that's the
strategy.
foundation.
But
I mean,
totally.
yeah, that's the foundation of being a dietitian. I mean, I think what I've certainly come to realize, and most dietitians I think would agree, is that all of your education up until this point and through your internship is invaluable. There's nothing about deciding that you want an online platform and an online career that negates all that. You have to have the ability to read science and to understand science and to understand science-based recommendations. You have to have all that. And then you have to have this whole additional set of skills to be able to write for, someone said SEO, search engine optimization, you know, to be able to write at the correct reading level. And then, you know, gosh, there are skills that I add to that: photography, video editing. And it's a lot. I mean, being honest, you know, this side of online communications requires an additional whole set of skills that you know, we didn't necessarily have to have right when we first got out of our internships, you know, a few years ago, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a lot of different skill sets.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's very fun. It's exciting.
Of course, so fun. Jasmine also had a question. We actually have quite a few questions, so I'm going to try to make sure we get to all of them. Jasmine asked, and I have some idea of this, but Regan, I'll throw it to you first, and then you can throw it back to me if you'd like. How do you get your content in magazines like Veg News?
Okay, so to be totally transparent, I don't think I'm the best person to answer that, because yeah, you take that one, because I'm serving as the spokesperson that the writer comes to. So you take that one.
Yeah. So Jasmine, if you probably have my email address, because and everyone here does. So if you have any questions, you can always send me an email. I'm the one that sent out the email invitation. I'm Bianca. Well, you can see it right here. I just really want to make sure you can get in touch with me. So to answer your question, Jasmine, so one thing, to get your content out there, you really have to pitch these journalists at these news outlets. So it's actually not as hard as you think to pitch them, but it is challenging and requires a lot of persistence to actually get into any outlet, especially like a larger outlet like Veg News. So what you would do really is, if there's a journalist or a writer online, if you're talking about online, that you think would really enjoy like a story idea that you have, then you essentially like find their contact information. Also, a lot of websites will have email addresses for journalists that are looking to receive story ideas. Additionally, online magazines will have like general pitch emails, or excuse me, a general email where you can send pitches, is what I'm saying. So pitch them a story idea. That's how it works. And it's just like follow up, keep like being persistent with new story ideas, but that's how dietitians get quoted and like get their content published. Allison also has a question. In regards to building a platform on social media, do you have any advice on how to gain a following and grow your media page?
Okay, yeah. So in terms of growing a following on a platform, that if you were starting at ground zero, I would pick one platform, and I would decide, you know, what platform and really, and this is kind of what I was saying a few minutes ago, make it the platform you really enjoy. There's nothing worse than someone saying, oh, I have to start doing reels, or I have to start making TikToks. And then I find out that like they hate the platform. And I'm like, you're not going to grow on a platform that you genuinely, you know, dislike. So first of all, pick one platform and consume a lot of that platform. And by that, I mean, like really, like, we'll just say TikTok, for instance. I think that's as easy as anything. You know, TikTok has its own personality. So if you're someone who's been on Facebook, for instance, forever, and you know kind of how the tenor and the tone is on Facebook, you don't just go over to TikTok and make it work. So, you know, like, you consume the content, see what tends to like do well. And then frankly, I'm not talking copy, but emulate things that you've seen, that you like, that resonate with you, and emulate, but also put your own unique spin on it. And that's that key thing that I was saying about like filling that void. Okay. So you've consumed the content, you know what kind of works, and then you generate content that has your own unique spin on it. And then you have to engage. You have to be able to be willing to answer questions immediately, respond immediately, and go on other content creators' pages and, you know, talk back and forth with them. And really, it's platforms, you know, they're called social media for a reason. And we've gotten away from that in a lot of ways because they have become so complex. But at the end of the day, social media started out to be social, for people to be able to connect with one another. And so when you can bring that social aspect, you know, you start commenting, people come to yours, you know, that really builds on itself, but it requires intense dedication to do it very, very regularly.
Yeah, I love how you pointed out, Regan, that like social media is called social. The word social is there for a reason. And just to add, you know, to what you were saying about building a following, like that was the number one thing that stood out in my mind to share is engaging with other accounts. So just like you said, not only responding to incoming messages and whatnot, but when you first start out, you're probably not getting any messages. So, or like DMs, like whatever platform we're talking about. So really you don't want to be like throwing your content out into a void. You, just like you said, like you have to be proactive in engaging with the community that is the audience that you're targeting as a dietitian. So that includes your audience itself. And like, if, you know, if you're trying to, if you're doing nutrition counseling virtually and that's what you're using social media for, you want to follow people that may be interested in your services. And the other thing that is helpful is also engaging with other dietitians or health professionals that are serving that audience as well. And I mean like liking, commenting, DMing in an appropriate, like friendly way, because then you want them to like uplift you the way you're uplifting them by commenting, by resharing, so that hopefully they share you with their audience. So just to speak generally, that's like something that can really help. And it's not going to happen overnight at all. If you talk to any dietitian that's on social looking to build a following, it's just persistence. But don't be defeated. It'll take time, but it is, like we keep saying, like all this is fun stuff. So.
And really, I think all of those are phenomenal pieces of advice. The additional thing that I would say that I wish people had stressed in the early days of social media, that now in looking back and seeing which dietitians seem to have like skyrocketed, the one thing that I can say they all do, in addition to being sort of unique in their own special way, is they provide value. Like, at the end of the day, people respond, you know, value, or, you know, you can look at it, entertainment, inspiration, education. Those are kind of three of the big things that really seem to do well, is when you fall into one of those categories. And so a lot of times I think new professionals, seasoned professionals, when they get on a platform, their number one goal is growth. When your number one goal should be servicing your followers. If you only have 5 followers, you need to give them your very best. They can tell 5 of their followers. And that really, I mean, I think that's a very important concept, because when you are providing value and you are fitting a need, that is really where authentic growth and a passionate fan base comes from. And, you know, you don't have to necessarily get 50,000 followers. You can get 10,000 followers that move on your every word. And that can be a very, very powerful following, a powerful following that you know that you're making a difference. But then also, you know, for brand partnerships where you can really like illustrate, hey, you know, this is what I see with my audience when I share with them, you know, a code for this, they redeem it, you know. So that's I guess reframing it a little bit to help you understand that like growth is important, but it also your following is important at different stages as well.
That I'm so happy that you mentioned that, because it is about your content. Like everyone knows that you can buy followers on these platforms,
Yeah.
but your engagement rate is going to be pretty bad. And that's when we talk about like partnering with brands, or just like in general, you want your platforms to be authentic. And speaking of like partnering with brands, like, and as I mentioned, like engagement rate, and that's something like if anybody on this call is already working with brands or is interested in working with brands, I know, Regan, that that's something that you really wanted to touch on today, and that I know that you're really picky about what brands you partner with. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, as you are, starting out and getting on different platforms, you'll be surprised at how quickly opportunities will come, I think, to find partnerships. And, I just always really encourage new professionals to be strategic about the partnerships that they develop. I mean, it's not a secret. I'm, doing this with Swerve tonight because it is a brand that I used before I ever knew anyone on the team. It's authentic to my life. I've been talking about it in my recipes, for years, talking about how I use it in baking with my family. And so in this last year, as I've really worked to refine, like, okay, where do I want my strategic partnerships to be? I actually sat down one day and I said, okay, who are the brands that I'm passionate about? Like I use in my home. If you came over, you would see them in my pantry. And Swerve was on that list, and there's a few others. And I think the reason that's important is because your followers can see right through inauthentic sponsorship. And there's this sort of tenuous relationship between you and your followers when you have sponsored content. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of followers probably would love it if we didn't have anything that was, sponsored. But when the sponsorship is authentic, they're so much more receptive to receiving it. They see it as, all right, she's been recommending this to me anyway. She believes in this product. And so I think that they're a little bit more receptive to, hey, it's okay that, there's some sort of like financial tie or something here together. Whereas if you're just kind of sitting and waiting and thinking, anything that comes across my path, I'm going to say, yes, I'll be a partner. The authenticity just doesn't really resonate. And I think it's really important to just immediately start thinking, who are the brand partners that I'm passionate about. The other thing is, Bianca, you had gone through what it's like to pitch, a magazine. The same thing is true when you are looking for brand partners. Is, if you do the work to think like, who are the brand partners I'd really want to work with, it's a lot easier to go to them and say, hey, I use your product. I talk about it here. I've always enjoyed it. And you can often have ideas for what you say to a brand partner to say, like, here's how I think that we could work together. Whereas a product that you don't know anything about, I mean, you don't really usually have any kind of creative ideas on how you can marry your audience with their needs for promotion of their product.
Yeah, I mean, well, first, I just want to say Swerve is very happy to be on that short list of brand partners that you want to partner with. And just, yeah, I mean, you're so right that your audience, like we've been talking so much about authenticity and how to grow your audience. And if your audience sees that you're just like recommending anything, or that you have only sponsored content, like it's really a dance. So definitely
it feels more like an advertisement, I think, when it's not authentic, and that's okay. I mean, we all start somewhere, but I think your audience is happier, and I think you as the content creator are happier when you can really work hand in hand with brands that you naturally believe in and want to promote. Or that's been my experience. And hey, I've had partnerships that in retrospect I thought, maybe not the best one, but I've learned to refine that over the years, and very happy, when it's an authentic fit like Swerve is.
Yeah. So we only have 10 minutes left, and I'm so glad that we were able to answer like almost everyone, or I think everyone's questions. I hope that we did. Feel free to plop them in there if we haven't answered your question yet. But I do want to talk about holiday baking with Swerve, because like you said, you have been a lover of Swerve for a while. So what are you going to be baking with Swerve this holiday season?
Well, I'm definitely going to make, there's a spice cake that I make that I put fresh cranberries on. I mean, you showed, I believe you showed the vanilla cake mix. That's, so yeah, the cake and I have to say that the database, the recipe database that Swerve has, for those of you who are in the chat box who are like, not yet, I'm going to, if you're new, first of all, if you're not a seasoned baker or you're new to Swerve, one of the best places that you can start is with those baking mixes. And you can look on the website and find some creative ways to use those. I've certainly done that. And I will be doing I've got a cranberry coffee cake that I'm doing with one of the cake mixes. Bianca and I both love the chocolate chip mix, and I put some pecans in mine. So I make a pecan chocolate chip cookie, just a basic cookie. I'll be making more of those. I had the last 2 yesterday. So I'll be using some of the mixes for that. But then usually what I do with my holiday baking, depending on who I'm baking for, is oftentimes what I will do is start with a half sugar and a half Swerve mixture. If you've never used Swerve before, I always say that's the best place to start. Just you replace half of the sugar with Swerve. And then that way you're cutting the sugar in half. It's not like we're saying sugar's evil or it's awful or anything, but realistically cutting the sugar in half and using the Swerve, it's just a really nice taste profile. I have 2 children and they never know the difference. And I just love that I've been able to cut the sugar in half. So that's the first place that I start. I will give, because I love to give this recommendation, another place that if you're a little bit more of a seasoned baker and you have recipes that you already know and love, any of them that already have some natural sweetness from from fruit, then I say use Swerve and its natural sweetness in place of the sugar. So you get the natural sweetness from the fruit, the natural sweetness that's a part of Swerve, and those recipes work out really, really well. So those are 2 great places to start, with your holiday baking and trying Swerve if you have it at this point.
Yeah, I think something that we wouldn't always think about is doing the half and half, which I love that you said that, baking with half Swerve and half sugar. And that's one of the things I really love about the Swerve team and the Swerve brand is that they are not anti-sugar at all. But it's all about balance, as we know, as experts in nutrition. It's all about balance. Sometimes you're going to have sugar, but by substituting with something like Swerve or using half and half, it just helps us enjoy them a little bit more often and just helps us with that balance. So I actually, I made some, and we're going to throw these recipes in the chat. So I have, you can see it a little bit, the cake over there. Reagan, as you said, these bake mixes are a great place to start. The cake that's behind me is a spice cake recipe that we're going to pop in the chat here. And I just love that the recipe includes the cake mix, but it also includes other products. So it feels like it's kind of like a doctored up cake, so that it's not totally from scratch, but it's not only mixing and popping in the oven. So I love that. I also made some really easy sugar cookies. And these are also gluten-free. They're made with almond and coconut flour. And I'm actually going to give you a close-up because I'm very proud of my decorating, but really,
it's so good.
Yeah, but I'm also showing, because I wanted to really show everyone how great Swerve browns. I mean, it's unlike any other sweetener I've used. I'm a dietitian and I've used a lot of sugar replacements and none of them taste or brown. I mean, that color is you would never know this isn't sugar. It's really insane and delicious.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to eat all these after today.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's the thing. Again, as a seasoned baker, that's one of the reasons that I'm very particular about it, because a lot of people don't realize sugar has a function of giving structure. It's not just sweetness, it's structure, it's moisture. And so when you usually take sugar out, if you try to use some sort of sugar replacement, oftentimes it just doesn't have those same qualities. But Swerve has those same qualities. So that's why it works really, really very, very well. And that I find that holds true not only for the granular, But you and I both, I mean, we've talked about this off Zoom. We love the brown. So the brown is amazing. It's like brown sugar, but it's brown Swerve. And then the confectioners is like a confectioner sugar, like powdered sugar. But it's just, it works really, really well.
It really does. And as I mentioned before, I think just like the last thing I wanted to touch on is, as I mentioned, Swerve is not like, Swerve is about like living your life and not getting too stressed out about like worrying about every little thing you're eating. Really what I'm trying to say is they're anti-diet culture, just like a lot of us dietitians. So how do you kind of like approach healthier baking in an anti-diet culture way? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I just had recently talked about this on my podcast. I just really have a mentality of like, I want to eat desserts every day, you know, and I think that you can do that, and you can do that with full sugar, and you don't have to feel like, you know, that you have to reduce sugar or anything. But I also realistically know, in the research, you know, we talked about like science, you know, evidence-based medicine here. We talk about science. The science is still pretty conclusive that like we don't need a tremendous amount of extra added sugar. So when you talk about really wanting to have sort of an embracing the joy of food and embracing like eating desserts, but you also are not wanting to add a lot of excess sugar into your diet, because we realistically know that that's not beneficial long-term for our health. To me, that's where Swerve comes in. And I think the half and half combo, especially for, you know, if you have a lot of people that you're cooking for, like I have, you know, kids at home and I'm baking for me and for them, to be able to do it in that way where I'm cutting back on the sugar, but maybe not just completely cutting it all out. It sort of meets that need to do healthy baking, but not do it in a way that feels like restrictive or deprivation or any kind of punishment. And I think that's really like the key in all of that. I eat for health, not for starvation and deprivation. And that's a really important point.
Yeah, I am so glad that you use the word deprivation, because that's how I feel about healthy baking. Like, it's all about intention. So if you're like healthy baking, the intention should not be like punishing yourself when it comes to your food choices. It should be about, like you had mentioned, like we all know that especially during the holiday season, there's a lot of added sugar everywhere. So
Yeah.
this is a choice that you're making because you want to, and also because with Swerve specifically, like you don't have to compromise in how like delicious it is. So you're not punishing yourself, because there's intention behind it. You're not there's no deprivation there. This is like an intentional choice to balance out all the other eating that we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, it's like making a big bowl of fruit to eat that, and, you know, someone who's into deprivation would say, oh, that has a lot of carbohydrates in it, I'm not going to eat that. But it's a big bowl of fruit, so it's good. And, you know, it's like rich in antioxidants and it has fiber. You know that like it's something good for you. It's the same thing to me when I'm baking with Swerve. It's like, oh, this tastes really, really good. But I know like, hey, you know, I've cut back on the sugar that's in this recipe. I actually just this last weekend, my husband saw, now this is how influential Instagram is. My husband, who's married to a recipe creator, like this is what I do for a living. He saw a recipe on Instagram and he sent it to me, and it was it's like a s'mores bar, which you're layering with like a gluten-free cookie, and then it has chocolate and all these different things. And I took that recipe, and anytime it called for sugar, I replaced it with Swerve. But then it had, I think, some marshmallows in it, and I like that, you know, that has sugar, so I just used that, and I was able to take that recipe and create a lower sugar version. Everybody in my family is loving it, and they all think it's super decadent. And I'm like, they don't even know that I have cut so much of the sugar out of it. But because it has some sugar in it, I mean, it's just, you know, like it's still indulgent, but I know that it's still a better choice for us overall. And that's how well it works. When you can take your husband and 2 children, and they don't know that you've tinkered with anything, you really have a good product that bakes really well.
Yeah, I mean, the fact I've heard that so many times that somebody will swap it out, swap Swerve in for sugar, and no one says anything. If you don't
No,
like
they don't know. Yeah, which is how you want it to be.
Exactly. Regan, thank you so much for joining us today. I just wanted to share a few reminders. I just dropped some links in the chat. So first thing is, if you're looking for Swerve for your holiday baking, either while you're preparing for finals, good luck everyone, or maybe when you get home, you can find Swerve, all of Swerve products on Amazon. They're also at major retailers like Target and Walmart. And stay in touch with us. So we have like lots of ways to stay in touch with RDs. We have the RD newsletter. The link is right there. We have a Dietitians for Dessert Facebook group. The link is there too. And then lastly, if you are doing holiday baking with Swerve, we really want to see all your treats. So tag us on Instagram at Swerve Sweetie. The link is there too. And that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for like a really great hour. I hope this was helpful. We talked about a lot of valuable tips for future RDs. So good luck and reach out if you need anything. Happy holidays.
Thank you.